Hi everyone, my name is Qais Hiwa and I'm going to present you today the three-layer fixed entity architecture in GraphRag, multi-agents, and reproductive medicine. So our agenda today is first of all to start with presenting myself, the companies where I'm working on, and that's going to give kind of a context actually to the challenge that we're going to present and the case that we're going to walk through throughout all the presentation today, and that is access to reproductive care and fertility treatments in Africa. And then going more into the technical aspects, technology part, and all roads lead to the entities, and then presenting the actual three-layer fixed entity architecture, but more on the camel startup way with more frugality and low access to resources. And finally, we're going to talk about the limitations and of the model evaluation. So again, my name is Qais Hiwa. I'm CEO and co-founder of Tanit Healthcare Technologies. That is actually a startup spin-off that was created a year ago out of one of the largest and oldest fertility centers based in Africa, and where I actually am Chief Strategy and Innovation and board member. And so in the past years, I was mainly working on trying to ease access to fertility treatments in mainly French-speaking Africa. Well, actually, there is 1 person over 6 worldwide that is affected by a disease called infertility. But fortunately, in Tunisia, we have like more than 70% of the population needs that are covered. And by the way, this is where Tunisia is. And unfortunately, Francophone Africa has less than 5% of the population needs coverage. And this is also mainly because no degrees of reproductive medicine and fertility are delivered in most of the West African medical schools. And so we've been working hard since 2017 to provide care to more than 30,000 patients from West African countries, but more importantly to train a fertility specialist from 24 African other countries. And so the big challenge here was to develop the access to reproductive care and fertility treatments in Africa by leveraging generative AI in order to have the largest impact in our community of doctors and patients. And so the challenge is to develop a cost-effective and efficient solution that we can deliver easily, but that can still be reliable, consensual, and based on highly trusted medical knowledge. And we wanted also to make it personalized to each user and still providing explainability to the answers, and of course without hallucinations, and with resource constraints making it relatively cheap. So talking about like all roads that leads to entity, I really like this way of that Christian presented it, like the development within multiple fields of computer science, in particular information retriever, database, NLP, and semantic web, comes back to entities as units of capturing, storing, organizing, and accessing to information. And that puts entities actually at the heart of what we're trying to do as RAG or GraphRag solutions in the healthcare sector. And so if we take, for example, a prompt of who created the School of Athens, and that Danny tried it as the founder of Wikidata, it takes actually 5 seconds for ChatGPT to perform it, and a little bit more than a half a second for Google search, and fourth of a second for Wikidata, and that is graph-based. And that proves that graphs are really performant and still cheap in providing relatively reliable answers. So now taken from the entities, and when we start like putting on relations and domain focus such as healthcare and rules, we come to medical ontologies, and I think this is where all started, even for the development of the semantic web. And here are some examples of medical ontologies that started being adopted since 1948. And the UMLS as a universal medical language system is coming from 1986. And we took like here an example of infertility and how it is represented from the mesh ontology, and that is really close to how we present information in knowledge graph. And something really important in medical ontologies, and that's actually all the information inside of it are consensual, and everyone is okay about it from a medical perspective, and that is validated and still updated on a regular basis. So now, coming to the three-layer fixed entity architecture, we actually really want to thank Irina from Accenture, who actually came up with this really fancy name in October 2024. And at that time, I think it was almost a year when we started like testing and designing this architecture. And so, yeah, Irina put in like a nice name here. But our architecture is a slightly revisited one from one that presented Irina. So Irina presented like two layers. One layer based on the actual knowledge of the company, and that's like the semantic layer, internal semantic layer, and then another one based on spacey named entity recognition, and then of course the third one that is based on documents and external documents and embeddings and vector stores. In our case, we actually merged the two layers of entities, medical ontologies, and the semantic layer. We, of course, kept, and that's like the second layer we have here. The first layer is medical knowledge base, where we restructured medical documents and put it on chunks, embeddings, and vector stores. And that we connected to the second layer of the medical ontologies. And the third one that we introduce here is the long-term memory user knowledge graph as context. And that is including all the information that was provided by the user. We reorganize it and store it in a knowledge graph that we can reuse every time that the same user is interacting with us, in order to put more context to the retriever engine. So actually working on this infrastructure, we started like again in October 2023, and at that time not all of the research papers were like working and validating actually the GraphRag infrastructure. So we were kind of navigating in something that wasn't like really sure. It was more like the teams from Neo4j that started very early working on this. And thankfully in April 24, that was the team from Microsoft that started working and publishing work on the GraphRag approach. And at that time, we started actually using the same technologies and the algorithm that they were using, such as the Louvain one. And as you can see here, where we clustered chunks with similar medical entities, for example. But we had like some differences here. Again, we're losing as less as possible like the LLMs in our infrastructure. And as you can see it here, for example, like the different layers that we were talking about earlier. And we have like the first layer here, like the example of the semantic and ontology layer. As we can see here, like different relations between diseases and drugs and how they interact. And then we take the example here of the medical knowledge layer, where basically we took some research papers and some medical documents that we represented in a knowledge graph, and then that we link after that in order to provide precise, much more precise and adapted personalized answers to users, basing it to the user context layer. And now, after like the research paper from Microsoft, there was like this really important research paper from the University of Oxford, and that is defining actually the medical graph rag. So basically, they have adapted and developed like a specific one in the medical sector. And so here, the main difference with our model is that they use in the step 2, 3, 4, 5, number 5 also LLMs in order to extract entities, populate the graph, use also metadata from these entities such as the type, maybe definitions, and store them in a graph, on top of the fact that they are also using the LLMs in order to prepare the documents and after that doing the embeddings. So these papers actually use more than 4 million research papers and 30,000 medical books that they treated with LLMs doing the NER part. I frankly don't want to know how much did this cost. So in our case, we actually used actually cheaper solutions. We did like some fine-tuning for NER models such as the SciSpace one into a domain-specific fertility and reproductive medicine. So basically, we use that in order to extract the information from all the documents that we had and all the chunks in order to connect the layer number 1 and the layer number 2. But also, we are using the NER in several other aspects, such as the prompt and the hybrid search. So as we're going to see it here, at the last paper that came back a couple of months ago in January, and where we can see actually a bit of everything, where they tried actually to lower the cost of the NER work and the connection between the different layers while still keeping a high accuracy. So basically they used RAG and LLMs at the same time in order to perform better NER based on clinical notes, personal actual patient clinical notes. And I think that makes a good analogy with our third layer here that we want to present, that is a long-term memory user knowledge graph as a context. So basically each user, we're going to create a personal context based on the previous interaction with the user, either by text or, for example, medical exams or medical reports that they want to share with us. So we also use NER on this, so we can structure it better on a knowledge graph, as we saw like in the example before, and store it user by user in their knowledge graph. So at the end of the day, we have like a multi-agent work here. So as soon as the user put on the query, we create a prompt that combines the user query and the user context that is derived from the personal long-term memory of the user, and then pass it as a prompt embedding to the hybrid search with the vector and full text search. And also, we're gonna, in parallel, do a prompt named entity recognition and do a direct linking with the entities inside the second semantic layer. And so everything that we're gonna retrieve, after that will go in a graph algorithms, such as community detection and detecting some shorted paths between different layers and different entities. And all what we're gonna derive here will go to the retrieved results and go finally to the LLM layer in order to put on a nice formulated answer to the user. And so as you can see here, we're only using the LLMs actually for its linguistic power, I would say, and that will avoid us a lot of actually cost, but also hallucination. We won't use the LLM for any other task in our work. So this is one of the examples. So to take actually scaling this is quite interesting and quite easy to do it. Moving from I don't know, 400 documents to thousands of documents is quite easy. And also working on this costed, we could like respect the cost constraints that we had. And we're talking about some of tens of thousands of dollars, not much. And we could also have some reliable answers. So now maybe if we want to talk about like the model evaluation and limitations. So since we're working on a very niche specialty, I think testing in artificial reproductive technology without having test and benchmark with a general test available was quite challenging and quite hard. Of course, like comparing with other models, because most of the medical benchmark actually are only working such as PubMed QA or any other testing model. They're actually working on a more general medical field information and not necessarily specified in one medical area or like sub-medical areas such as fertility treatments. That's one point. The second point is actually is not using like real patient cases or real clinical cases. It's only using yes/no questions or like short multiple choice questions, and that makes like difficult to say that your model is it like really accurate or precise in making like good answers. But nonetheless, we try to do comparisons with these models. So we developed 100 yes/no questions related to infertility that we derived actually from the exams of the reproductive medical master degree from the Medical School of Tunis. And that is actually one of the oldest master degree that is running in the continent since more than 20 years. And so we did collaborate with the Medical School of Tunis to take like different exams and to combine different complex, I would say, questions and run it also to GPT-4 Turbo. And at that time, back in April 2024, we had a better precision score. On the other hand, we also worked a lot on the time to first token. At the beginning, we started with more than 20 seconds for the first token. And after some optimizations, we could actually reach less than 2 seconds for this part. And maybe other limitations, now talking about what is happening in developing countries, including Tunisia. Most of the actual cloud providers, such as Azure, AWS, or Google Cloud Platform, they don't exist in our countries. I think there is only one or two cloud infrastructures that are based in some of the countries, I think in South Africa, and there is another one. But most of the countries that don't have this. So if you want to work with medical data sovereignty challenges and still leveraging some other resources from these cloud providers, that's going to be quite difficult or almost impossible. So we need to manage high costs of on-premises infrastructure investment and maintenance, and that necessarily not feasible for everyone. And the other point is also training our proper models and fine-tuning based on our actual population data is quite challenging because the data is not necessarily available. Fortunately, for our case, we are actually working with real patient data where we're training machine learning models in order to predict the work of doctors, for example, for trigger day for oocyte pickup, or like working on the first day the dosage of medication for the first day of medical treatments. And I think this can be like very helpful for our communities of doctors in French-speaking Africa that can help them move from 0 patient to 1 patient and increase the access of treatment to their population. So, but fortunately, now going back to the evaluations of LLMs, and I think this is like the last example, and I think it's quite promising, and that came out in January 25 from Stanford also. And actually, they are actually combining different data sets that represent a spectrum of healthcare scenarios. It's not just like yes, no, or multiple choice questions. So it's going from diagnostics, decision making to patient communication. So it's providing more nuanced, clinically relevant assessment of AI capabilities in healthcare settings. So now we're talking about like real clinical cases of patients, on top of which we can start doing more realistic evaluations of large language models. And I'm curious to see what are like the results that's gonna be done here. So yeah, I thank you for your attention, all of you. And I really invite you to reach out for any partnership if you're interested to know a little bit more what we're doing. And also our objective is to also perform a little bit more our actual solution and also deploy it from a case in fertility to a larger number of medical specialties. So thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed my presentation.